Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And back again with some more updates, on current events, and just sort of continuing along the lines. And I've sort of been monitoring a lot of what's going on, at least the articles that come out on this digital ID, slash Orwellian dystopic future that the UK is very quickly, pushing for and moving into. And we know that it's not going to be or just stop there, right? But I covered, a couple of articles dealing with their push under this certain act of so-called was an Online Safety Act, claiming to protect children. But when you look at what they're actually, using that for and trying to do, it goes far beyond that. Okay. Trying to install surveillance software on physical devices so that your phone can literally be tracked at all times. Trying to put software to, to verify, be you who you are tied to your digital ID before allowing you to fully unlock your phone, to use it to its full capabilities. When you take pictures, them having the ability to scan it to make sure that this isn't a child who's using your phone to take a picture, inappropriate picture, or even view inappropriate pictures. But all it is leading to that world. Okay, it's that next phase in the agenda, and they're moving quickly with it. All right, it's no more about talks, it's now about implementation. So it says Ministry of Truth, the UK government to block, quote, false information during crisis events. Vague new rules will allow UK regulators to pressure platforms over legal but harmful content whenever government ministers declare a crisis, while the same government plows ahead with mandatory phone scanning, digital ID lockdowns, and jail threats for tech bosses who refuse to spy on every device. And what they've done is this sort of relationship they've built. And they claim that you have the public and the private sector and this so-called capitalist society and all of that. But in actuality, they have the platforms, right, that people go and use. But then on the government side, they have laws and legislations that are in place. And they can use those laws and legislations or pass new ones to threaten or force or coerce these platforms, which would seem to be private, to be able to do their own thing. But they would basically force them into regulating certain things, right? Introducing certain restrictions on their own platforms under the guise that if they don't, they would be violating some law or some legislation and will be worthy of a fine or, jail time or whatever extent they're trying to go with. And that's what we're starting to see here as we just read this, right? As they're mentioning that pressure and threats on certain platforms and even internet service providers, and sort of saying, hey, it's your responsibility to make sure that the content posted on your platform doesn't violate what we describe as, pushing out false information or dangerous information. The latest move from Northern Ireland Secretary Hilary Benn makes explicit what privacy campaigners have long warned. The Online Safety Act is being weaponized for beyond any child protection claim. And that's what they do. It's a tactic that they've used over and over again. Benn confirmed that the internet regulator will now wield enhanced powers to tackle false information online during times of crisis, directly tying the recent Belfast unrest to this framework. The regulator has already contacted platforms, so they have appointed regulators or an appointed internet regulator who regulates the internet and is able to contact these platforms, major platforms that allow users to interact or use the internet through their software in certain ways, right? Whether it's like, for example, you have Instagram, right, or YouTube and different sites. You're using the internet for that, but it's through different means, right? You can be playing an online video game that's using the internet, but through a different avenue. It says the regulator has already contacted platforms, with ministers asserting that violence appears to have been incited online, and that's the new sort of boogeyman and threat that also justifies, or at least they're trying to use to justify these strict and stringent and privacy invading measures. They claim it's to protect children. They claim it's an example is, look at what's happening with this Belfast unrest, having been sparked through online, sedition, and they're using that to say, well, we can't allow this. It says here, if we are living in a country where you cannot report the truth, we are living under a dictator. And they've seen how things went. They saw how the C-19 situation went, how it was difficult to control the information and the narrative. And they're seeing how a lot of information is coming out from different avenues outside of the mainstream media, right? At first, these alternative platforms were looked at as conspiracy theorists that didn't agree with the government, were crazy and so on. And most people just ate whatever was fed to them via the mainstream media. But now it is flipped. And now people go more towards social media or alternative platforms for information as opposed to the mainstream media. And it's making it harder and harder to control the narrative or the perception of people. So they need to come down heavily upon this information and trying to gain the upper hand in this so-called info war. The latest move from, Slacky already read that. So let's take a look here at this. Adam Brooks warns of government censorship as Labour announces a social media crackdown in times of crisis after the Belfast unrest. And then they also tell you, well, what is a crisis? Well, it's subjective to whatever they deem a crisis to be. So let's hear this.
And there is a massive censorship row taking place tonight after the government unveiled plans to curb social media use in what they say are times of crisis. So writing, ironically, on social media last night, the Technology Secretary Liz Kendall said, those who use social media to incite violence and disorder are breaking the law. Next week, we will lay in Parliament an update to the Online Safety Act requiring services to take quicker action to remove illegal content circulating during times of crisis. Now Adam, you were there. You were doing live broadcasts from protests out there. There's a very good chance, mate, that they would accuse you, wrongly in my view, they would accuse you of inciting violence and disorder, and they would class that as a time of crisis, and then bingo, you get a knock on the door from the police, don't you?
Look, I was on holiday last summer, coming back, expected maybe police to stop me at Stansted Airport because there were so many lefties and wokies online tagging the Met Police, tagging Essex Police, that I'd incited so-called riots. I even had a hashtag, Brooks Riots, when it was kicking off in Epping. All I did was report the truth. And if we're living in a country now where you cannot report the truth, we're living under a dictator. And I think Keir Starmer and his government should be ashamed of themselves. They are treating everyday Brits as the enemy, and they are treating these foreign invaders as a priority, and people have had enough. I've even had lefties come up to me in Manchester, that's where I am at the moment, saying, you know what, I thought you was wrong last year, you were bang on. And that is people in their 30s, in their 20s that thought I was wrong last year. Now they're saying, we can see why you do it. There's no hate from me. There's no malice. These men are a danger, or many of these men are a danger to our young girls and our women. And we've got to stop it. I would shut the asylum system. And when people say, oh, that's unfair, all right, let's make it for women and children only, because we cannot keep having these men that are desensitized. At a minimum, they're desensitized to violence, if not violent or very sexual, plonked in the middle of these little villages and towns and not expecting these things to happen. So look, this is a message to Keir Starmer.
Okay, so there's that. Anyway, probably played a little more than necessary there. So here it says, Ben stated that if people put online false information, it is not acceptable, and it may well be a criminal offense, depending on the circumstances, as the chief constable made clear yesterday. And they purposely use this kind of speech, right? May, depending. And who's to be the one that determines whether it is or not? Who's to be the one that determines what it depends on, right? And that's going to be up to them, their discretion, this internet regulator. When asked how a time of crisis would be defined, Ben said, it will be set out in due course. See that? And that's the problem right there. How is it going to be defined? Oh, it's going to be set up in due course. So they're basically telling you, well, you're going to find out. That's for us to know and you to find out. Right? So let's listen to this here.
I wonder if there might be a presumption now. Should there be a presumption that certain countries, certain cultures exist where we should now say we don't feel we're compatible? We don't actually want young men coming into this country from places like Sudan. Or is that an unreasonable view? Do you think that's a racist view to say, do you know what, there may be some cultures from which we don't wish to accept young men coming into this country as a rule?
Well, Stig, would you apply that to a Sudanese surgeon who, as you and I are speaking, may be operating in a hospital in the United Kingdom in an attempt to save somebody's life? I don't think you can judge people on that basis.
But you might say that we might sacrifice the people who like the Sudanese surgeon for a rule that is enforceable that simply says, if you come from a certain country, we just don't feel our cultures are compatible. I'm just asking the question, is that even a reasonable debate to be had?
I don't agree with that, because I think every individual should be judged, as Martin Luther King famously said, by the content of their character and not by the colour of their skin.
And you think that's not changed in recent months? We shouldn't have a different conversation about migration and where people come from?
We are putting in place, as you know, we're going to change the immigration system. The proposals that have been announced by the Home Secretary, we have deported 70,000 people, nearly 70,000 people with no right to be here since the general election in 2024. So we are toughening up the system. We are getting net migration down. But ultimately, you have to look at each case individually. Okay. That is the right and proper thing to do.
Liz Kendall is talking about forcing social media companies to remove posts inciting violence in times of crisis. Who decides what is a time of crisis?
Well, that will be set out in due course, but I think it's fair to describe what we have seen in Belfast and other parts of Northern Ireland over the last couple of days.
So is it when there are riots? Is it when there's a protest? Well, is it when there's public concern? Because what is the difference between a protest and a riot? When do we use the term one or the other?
Well, I think it's pretty clear to members of the public, as the Ogilvy family have made clear, they think peaceful protest is the way to go, but the kind of shocking disorder and violence that we've seen is not acceptable. Most people can readily make a distinction.
Do you think people can do you think there's a universal standard of when a crisis happens? I'm not sure that's true, Hilary.
Well, I think we will set that out in proposals that will be published. But the essential point, Stig, is that if people are putting online false information, we have seen, the Chief Constable spoke about this yesterday, we have seen people putting online addresses. And the clear incitement is that is an address you should go to because ethnic minority people live there. And we have seen that in the past, people being burned out of their homes because of the colour of their skin. Now, it is not acceptable, and it may well be a criminal offence depending on the circumstances, as the Chief Constable made clear yesterday. It is not acceptable for that to be done.
Now, you notice what he did there, right? He'll give you a little example and say, oh, like for example, people putting addresses of where others live and then saying, go here and do this. But then, and then that would be like an example to throw out there and say, like, it is because of these kinds of reasons that we are implementing this new regulation. But then when you look at what happens after they implement the regulation, you might as well throw out that example, throw that out the window, because they do everything else but address situations like that, right? And that's literally how it goes. So somebody might wonder, like, why is there such a push for this? Like this whole quote unquote migrant crisis and letting it. I mean, we were here. We remember when there was this open up your borders. Don't, like, they had people appointed to deliberately come and push to say, yes, keep the borders open. Let anybody, any and everybody come on in here. Not even just the U.S., but in Europe as well. Let them flood on in here. And we said that. Look, this doesn't make sense. Like, there's a reason behind all this, because now you're starting to see these outlandish and these crazy sort of situations that are taking place, which is setting up the people, because it's a problem, reaction, solution. What they were doing was they were creating a problem, a controlled problem, meaning the problem that they already sort of simulated. And this is what they want, because it will lead to a certain reaction from the people, which then gives them the ammo to say, see, this is why we need to do this. This is why we need to do that. And it's literally their MO. Like, this is what they do. Okay, they do this shit. It says the unrest followed a serious knife attack on a local man by an asylum seeker and escalated into protests involving vehicles, fires, arson attacks in homes, and clashes with police that injured a dozen officers. All right, and as this keeps on going, in fact, let me see what's going on here. Yeah, it says that the government said the Online Safety Act was about protecting children. We were called conspiracy theorists for saying it wasn't. Well, Ofcom is writing to platforms about crisis situations, which apparently they haven't really defined yet, civil unrest, and enhanced moderation measures, blocking posts they don't like. And he mentioned false information, right? But once again, what is the definition of that? Because there have been many instances, even during the lockdowns, when people told the truth, we told the truth, and they said, no, that's misinformation, and got our channels deleted and off of YouTube and got strikes left and right, because anything you posted that was not what they said was considered false or misinformation. So when they come out and say false information, they're basically saying anything like this post says that we don't like or we don't approve of. And well, if you're evil, then damn near anything that's right is going to be considered false information. But that's the Lord is doing that on purpose, because ultimately this is going to circle back to fulfilling prophecy. Amos 8:11, right? The famine of hearing the words of the Lord, it's going to kick into effect. And what the Lord is doing right now with all of this is he's sort of putting blindfolds over the eyes of the people. So before letting them loose in the arena of Jacob's trouble. So now you don't have the eyes or the guidance or the direction, because the source of guidance and direction, which is the Lord via the mouth of his prophets, is no longer there. So it's like putting a blindfold on. And now you're cooked. In the most dangerous time, you don't have that direction. What are you going to do then? That's why it says they're going to run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord, and they're not going to find it. And all this is going to, once again, lead to the famine of hearing the words of the Lord. And not just the words of the Lord, but really anything that is not in line with what narrative they want to push. Check this out. It says, according to the UK government, you're considered a T terrorist if you believe that Western culture is under threat from mass migration. Yes, this is really on their website. Extreme right-wing T-rist ideology, West culture or Western culture is under threat from mass migration and a lack of integration by certain ethnic and cultural groups. So that's they're saying that if you think that's the case, then you are a T, okay, or this is right-wing ideology. And that's what they do. They'll label you a dissident, And once they've established that as the new status quo, they're going to start to push for, what do we do with these dissidents? What do we do with these homegrown T's, right? These right wing, these extreme radicalized people and those that are radicalizing them. What do we do with that? Well, we got to start separating them from everybody else, right? So they're not affecting and infecting the minds of everybody else. We need to isolate them. We need to start putting them in re-education camps. That it's the path ahead, and this car is going full speed towards it. Okay, and the time is coming when the warnings are going to stop. They're going to cease, and the reason that they're going to come after this word is because this world is evil, right? John 7:7. This world. This is what the Lord said. The world cannot hate you, but me it hateth, because I testify of it that the works thereof are evil. So if we are speaking the words of the Lord, and as he said in his time, which is much more so in our time now, the scriptures say, hate the evil and love the good. So if we speak against evil in a world that is evil, what do you think they're going to consider us? Once again, this world doesn't see as good or bad. This world sees as you're either part of us or you're not. So if they are wicked and you are righteous, they see you as the enemy because you're not a part of them. You're not of this world. You're not speaking the things that are in line with the agenda of this world. Therefore, you're not allowed to speak. You shouldn't have a platform to speak. And if they are coming after online so-called free speech, which is not really free, you best believe they're going to make sure that you're not saying anything anywhere. And they've showed you little glimpses of that. Once again, in turn of these other countries during the lockdowns, they showed you glimpses of how extreme they can go, which that was just the surface. They can go a lot further than that, but that's the times we're coming into. All right, I want to get one more precept here. And it's very, very important to heed these warnings. Don't wait till you find yourself in this situation wondering how you got here, having no solution, no way out, because you weren't privy to the times that were coming ahead. This is Isaiah 33:6, and wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure. Remember that the knowledge and the wisdom and the faith you're building up now is going to be literally what you have to depend on in that time. Okay, first and foremost on having the names of the Lord and his son, Yahweh, Yahushai, but you won't have, necessarily our voices, telling you, hey, this is what's going on right now, so do this or do that. You're going to need to rely on the Spirit of the Lord, right? And the faith and the knowledge that you have to make decisions that are going to affect your life and those that are around you, right? And to remain calm and to trust, to have that strong faith and that trust in the words of the Lord that'll keep you stable. These things that we're telling you about are happening. All right, they're happening, and it's making its way really around the world, over here to Babylon very, very quickly. So with that, I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying and informative to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Rakha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.